Hood. Oh, snap!
No, I was trying to lay an egg. Well, well, well. What did Mother eBay provide for us today? Oh, it's like an ice saw or a hay saw. I've seen these referred to as both. This one has tiny serrated teeth, whereas most of the ice saw pictures I find show very large, long teeth like a lumberjack saw. So who knows, maybe this is more of a hay saw. In either case, it's really cool and very rusty. And rust is a good sign because I think it means we're going to find out this is non-alloyed, forgeable steel, and there may be some iron or something in here. Let's start checking that out. The blade is divided into sections. In case of damage, you don't have to replace the entire blade. And I can't see how those sections are attached to the spine yet. I love how these old manufactured tools are constructed. It's often very interesting, I'm finding. So here's, for example, the antique plane iron video. The plane blade had a small sliver of bladeworthy high carbon steel surrounded by iron. Iron is hard to come by these days, but it was much more accessible than high carbon steel in the 1800s. Even more interesting was the antique scythe we looked at, which had a solid high carbon steel core surrounded by mild steel, seen here in this cross-sectional etching. Fascinating they were doing that in the 1800s. Here's the handle. There's some good chunky metal back here that we might be able to put to use. So what else here? Let's get to spark testing and figure some of this out. I bet our blade is nice hardenable high carbon steel, and the spine I think is going to be mild steel or iron. The spark testing shows long flowering sparks, almost certainly high carbon steel that will be able to forge and quench into a hardenable, suitable knife edge. Now as far as the spine, very few sparks. Very few sparks, and they don't split into more than 2s or 3s. So again, probably iron or mild steel. Mild steel. Probably iron. Let's see if we can get some of these sections off. Yeah, check that out. There's holes for rivets. We didn't see those rivets with all the rust. Isn't that interesting? I'm going to go ahead and drill out the rest of these. I don't want to bend our blade material by chiseling it out if we can help it. So how do I know where to drill? Well, if you bang on the blades lightly with the jeweler's hammer, it loosens things up to where you can make out a faint outline of the rivets on the spine. We've gathered our high carbon steel bits. Now let's see exactly how hard they are. You know, a good HRC for a knife edge is going to be 58 to 62 for most deals.
So that's good. 65 leaves some scratches. 60 and 55 do not. So very hardenable. Nice. Now the issue is how to get these together. I have to strip all the rust off of them. So now I have to forge them together. Probably to make a core, which I'll sandwich some of this material around for San Mai. So you can see there's several portions of this steel that are going to be difficult to use. This narrowed part here, I'm not going to be able to forge weld that together with any efficiency. And these holes here, you know, it's basically sort of, you either cut the holes out like this, or use just this part, or cut tiny strips. I don't know. It's going to be tough. I don't know about that piece.
Let's get our blade bits cleaned up and prepared for forge welding. I've decided to go ahead and stack them just whole like this. We're going to deal with those holes by essentially trying to avoid them. Once this is all welded up, we'll try to do some things to make sure we don't incorporate those holes into our edge and that they're not revealed at the spine either. All right, we have our core material. Let's find our jacket material. This is the handle, and it just crumbles. I think that is probably cast iron, and that's why it's crumbling. Let's go back to flattening out the spine of our cutter and see what we get. It's forging just fine. Again, I think that this is probably iron or mild steel. Probably iron. So after flattening, this looks like the best area as a candidate for our jacket material. So we're going to clean this up and cut it up, and then we'll get it ready for forge welding. Here's what it's going to look like. The soft spine material on the outside and our core material on the inside. It's like a sandwich. Now we just got to forge weld all this together. I've got the forge at sort of a neutral flame, that blue. We're going to take it out when the piece gets to red hot and apply our flux. We're going to let the flux run everywhere and then take it over to the press and shut those gaps on the press. It's not welding when it goes to the press because it's not at welding heat yet. So we're closing the gaps, and then we're going to put it back in the forge, heat it to welding temperatures, and take it to the anvil where we tap all the welds. After the welds are set, we're going to take it back to the press and flatten everything out. Now we have our piece welded together and the edges are cleaned, so a quick dip in the ferric chloride shows our edge material is pretty well centered. I'm going to take it back to the forge and draw it out a little more and see, get a better idea of exactly what we have to work with at the desired thickness. And as you can see, we have some cracks opening up on this one edge. I suspect that's just metal fatigue from the iron. We're just going to have to be creative and work around that. We'll have to forge/grind our way around those. I'm going to go back to the press though and draw out the tip a little more, and then we're going to sort of forge and grind our way around the butt of the handle a little more. Next, we're going to go over to the grinder and grind out our profile. We don't forge these to shape because our edge material is midline right now, and if we do a lot of forging, we can sort of upset that a little bit. I like this. I like the way this turned out. This is a great shape. I'm going to do a small amount of bevel grinding here before we harden it, but not a lot. As for thermal cycling, our mystery steel, we're going to do 1620 Fahrenheit, 1500 Fahrenheit, 1375 Fahrenheit normalization cycles, then a quench from 1490 into Parks 50. This was tempered starting at 350 degrees, and I worked my way up slowly to 390 degrees over 3 tempers, checking the hardness after each temper. Final hardness here was right at 60, as best I can tell with my files, and that's where I stopped tempering. All right, moment of truth. Let's get this into ferric chloride and see what we got. Wow, very cool. Looks like a well-refined iron around a high carbon steel to me, but I could be wrong. There's these interesting sort of bright areas between the jacket and the core. I love it.
So I really like this effect here with this bright hamon type of thing. It's not actually a hamon, but you sort of get that sense when everything is more darkly etched. The problem is there's no relief here. This isn't typical Damascus, right? There's no ups and downs. The bright etching steel is not raised over the dark etching steel like you would normally have, which protects the oxides from wearing off to some degree. In a typical Damascus pattern, And we don't have that here. This is all sort of flush with each other. There's no relief. And so these oxides are going to wear off very quickly. That's sort of the downside to something like this. I think what I'll do is I'm going to etch it a little darker here, and then I may just polish with Moz or something, metal polish, which will sort of give us an effect in between this and the last version, I think. Let's see what happens. I've got this side glued on. I'm doing this differently than I do most scales, but this is a forged finish, and I've had to sand down from here, a very specific line right there, down to here to flatten the tang so that I can fit the handles on. So I have to do one side at a time. I can't drill and then attach them because I have to know exactly where to place this edge for the scale, right? Because it fits in just right in a specific spot. So I glue one side on, drill the holes on this side, and then I glue the other side on right where it needs to be, and then drill the holes back from that side. Then put in the fasteners, and we're good to go. It's a little different than I normally do it, but that's just how I do these forged finished scales, where I have to do some sanding behind the forged finish to make sure that this is flat.
Well, this is crushing. So a split opened up during grinding, or at least maybe that's just when I saw it after I got to 400 grit on the grinder. And even though this burl is stabilized, things like this can happen. So I'm going to have to tear off this handle and start again.
That was incredibly hard to get off. I had to like put it in a vise and drive a chisel just right there and just drive it all the way down. And that's crazy. G-Flex epoxy, man. Sticky stuff.
All right, finally a new handle is on. Let's look at this edge at 3000 grit and see what this steel can do. Now this newspaper print has been crumpled, so there's some folds in it, and it's going to catch on those folds sometimes, but that's not a reflection of the edge or the sharpening. That tends to happen on this fine newsprint paper. Things will catch on rough edges and they'll catch on folds. So make no mistake, basically this edge is a very nice edge. It really is. Let's get her oiled up for the camera and take some beauty shots. So pleased with this, you guys. It looks incredible. I love the effect. I love the sanmai. The jacket material looks amazing etched. The core material turned out to be really good knife steel as best I can tell. I like the profile. I like the handle material. It's one of those projects where things went right. Things go wrong around here a lot, and things went right this time. So, you know, every squirrel finds a nut. At any rate, I'm also, as usual, just sort of mystified and interested and in awe with what they were doing way back when in the 1800s with manufacturing. So you guys have a good one.